Almost 1/3 of UK workers say they've quit a job because of a negative workplace culture, and that is according to a survey that underlines the risk of managers failing to rein in toxic behavior. Research carried out by the Chartered Management Institute pointed to widespread concern about the quality of management and its impact on workers' daily lives. And in the US, around 30 million, or 1 in 9 US workers, experience their workplace as toxic. Now, according to research conducted by MIT Sloan School of Management, most of us have experienced these types of environments where people behave badly across all levels. Now, this behavior goes without consequences and fosters a workplace culture where you don't feel safe, seen, or valued. Trust, respect, and transparency are non-existent, and it feels like everyone is on their own. Employees and most people in the company are disengaged, they're stressed, and there are several reasons for this. But in my rather extensive experience with a number of senior leaders, I feel they are part of the problem, whether through acts of omission as in being passive, or doing nothing, or commission, or sometimes even consciously pitting people against one another, or driving their egotistical agenda forward at the expense of the team or the organization. Now, if you're joining us, thank you for tuning in, and hello, welcome to Empowerment Junction. My name is Olivia Bassi, your host and guide on this path of growth. With over 15 years of experience in teaching, training, assessment writing, and product development, I've fostered a deep-seated passion for sharing knowledge and igniting curiosity. Now, Empowerment Junction is your go-to podcast for actionable advice and inspiration to thrive, not just in the workplace, but in every aspect of life. Throughout the podcast, I'll be sharing my personal stories and equipping you with tactical strategies to grow and thrive wherever you are in life. Join me each week as we explore practical strategies and tips to navigate, cultivate resilience, and achieve your goals. If you're new to Empowerment Junction, I invite you to subscribe, like, and join our community of empowered listeners, and together, let's embark on the journey of a more empowered and fulfilling life. Before we dive into today's topic, I'd like to share a personal update with you, and as always, I want to express my deepest gratitude to each and every one of you who have been on this journey with me. Whether you've been a long-time listener or have just joined us, your presence and support means the world to me. Empowerment Junction is not just a podcast, it's a community of like-minded individuals committed to growth, empowerment, and positive change. Your engagement, feedback, and enthusiasm fuels the heart of this podcast, and for that, I am truly thankful. To those who have recently discovered Empowerment Junction, welcome aboard. I am so honored to have you join us on this path of growth and inspiration. Together, we'll continue to learn, evolve, and empower each other to reach new heights. Thank you once again for being part of this incredible journey. And here's to many more conversations and moments of growth ahead. As for my personal update, as you know, I'm a big fan of exercise. Now, lately, I've been exploring the intersection of mindfulness and exercise, particularly through running and Pilates. I've found that combining mindfulness practices with these physical activities not only enhances my overall well-being, but also deepens my connection to the present moment. Whether it's feeling the rhythm of my breath while running or finding balance and focus during a Pilates session, I've experienced significant moments of clarity and tranquility. And I'm so excited to delve deeper into this topic in future episodes and share insights on how mindfulness can enrich our exercise routines and elevate our physical and mental health. Now, if you have experiences or tips to share on mindfulness and exercise, of course, I'd love to hear from you. Your input inspires and guides the content we create together. Now, without further ado, let's delve into today's episode and shift our focus to the start of an important series inspired by many of our listeners who have sent me emails expressing concern about this topic. Today marks the beginning of a series of episodes where we'll be delving into the complex and critical topic of workplace culture. Now, in this first series, we'll define the key characteristics of common toxic workplace, shedding light on the signs and symptoms that might indicate that you're in an unhealthy work environment. Subsequently, we'll follow up with the second series where we'll provide practical actions and strategies for dealing with these types of workplaces. Toxicity in the workplace can have significant effects on our mental health, productivity, and overall well-being. As you know, this podcast is called Empowerment. Empowerment is gaining the knowledge and putting it into action. Now, by understanding and addressing these issues head-on, we can create healthier and more fulfilling work environment for ourselves and others. So, without delay, let's kick off this series and explore the defining characteristics of toxic workplaces. Now, I'll start with a recent study from Management Review, School of Management, which states, a toxic workplace culture was the number one reason why people left their jobs in 2021. Researchers found that the leading elements contributing to toxic cultures include a failure to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion, workers feeling disrespected, and unethical behavior. So, here are the most common signs of a toxic workplace. Or rather, the following are your best or worst indicators of a toxic workplace. And I'll add, if your workplace has one of these, it might be toxic but also fixable. If your workplace has several or even all of these markers, I suggest you work on an exit strategy, or you begin to work on an exit strategy. Now, toxic work environments breed unrest, competition, low morale, constant stresses, negativity, sicknesses, high turnover, and even bullying. Even worse, toxic workplaces rarely stay at work. They typically follow you home. They take over your conversations with loved ones, steal away much needed sleep, and generally cause worry and stress. Toxic workplace can lead to stress, burnout, depression, damage to your self-esteem, and serious disruptions in your normal life. Just ask the psychologist if you want to understand what toxic workplaces do. So, if you landed on this episode today, or if you clicked because you're wondering if your work problems are the result of generalized stress or something worse, here are the 10 signs. And I've got 10 signs because there are many other signs, but these are the most common 10 signs in most workplaces. And I know workplaces have different organization structures and dynamics and models, but these are the most common in major organizations. So the first one A toxic workplace may have poor communication. Insufficient, confusing, or scattered communication is the culprit of so many problems in the workplace. In fact, communication skills are the most important skills needed in any successful organization. Main reason, so much falls under the communication umbrella, including listening skills both as a manager and as an employee or a worker, verbal communication, written communication, and preferences on how to communicate. The list is endless. The list goes on. There should be a process and a guide on how to communicate. That's why it's written. You will find on a HR guide or your employee induction book the expectations, and that's part of the communications in that workplace. But if there's poor communication, then this is an indicator that this is potentially a toxic workplace. So how do you tell if bad communication is leading to workplace toxicity? Now, these are some of the examples that I've come across. Overall lack of communication is becoming a core issue. How often do you receive those updates? Perhaps maybe from the senior leaders or from your bosses? Constant lack of clarity around projects. And this is quite common where this month you have a project. In the middle of the month, another project lands on your desk. By the end of the month, you have another project and they all seem to be a priority. Now, this indicates there's a lack of planning, or, as I say, the communication is not very accurate, which means you haven't been provided with a skill set to understand the expectations of the projects within certain months. And that's why you're probably feeling overwhelmed if you have many projects on your desk. Now, different employees receive different messages, yes, but there are certain cues that are very important to be able to define and decipher whether you're in a toxic workplace. Now, the first cue is a passive-aggressive communication. Now, passive-aggressive communication happens a lot of the time, and it's not an easy situation to deal with. So, for example, it could be you've asked for a project to be done in time, or you've sent an email and the response comes back saying, good for you, or something along those lines, or whatever, or if you say so. Those are passive-aggressive communication. And the reason really here is to understand why employees or people in that organization feel they are justified to respond in this manner. Now, another example could be backhanded compliments, which oftentimes are the intersection of passive aggression and sometimes jealousy, or subtle insults intended to ultimately put you down, being addressed without seeming directly mean-spirited. Now, there are many examples of passive aggression. And a lot of the times, this is a definite indicator that this is a behavior in this organization that it's becoming a culture, it's becoming a norm. And this is a sign to indicate that this is a toxic workplace culture. Now, another one that I've picked up on is constant off-hours communication, where emails are sent outside your working time or the time you've been contracted to work. That is an issue, because if it's a critical email, it should be during the times you work. Your boss or your manager should be aware that your working hours, as an example, are from 9 till 5. Now, communication is the root cause of bad organizations or good organizations operating poorly. Bad communication often leads to confusion and a lack of purpose for employees. From here, problems arise and compound, often leading to all the other items on this list today. Now, if your company has bad communication methods, I would say you are likely in a toxic environment that's perhaps going to get worse in time. So you need to keep an eye on this. Now, the next sign is where you have cliques, exclusion, and gossipy behavior. This goes without saying. Now, this is a toxic work environment. I mean, nobody wants to feel like they're back in primary school or they're back in 8th grade. And that's exactly what this type of behavior is. It can be pretty deflating, and we all know what a clique looks like. It's the group of people, whether at work, at school, or wherever they are, stick together. They always grab each other coffee. They have inside jokes and generally exclude anyone outside of their tight-knit unless you are gossiping with them. And while we are all adults here, it can feel extremely alienating to exist on the outside of an active clique. Simply put, cliques are counterproductive in the workplace. While having workplace friends and acquaintances is good, any behavior that can be described as cliquish is best to be avoided. Now, steer clear of any cliques, workplace bullies, or exclusionary groups. Nobody wants to go back to primary school or eighth grade or whatever, no matter how good the benefits might be. Now, what are the signs you've got some of this cliquing and gossipy behavior in your office? Constant feeling of exclusion from a group of people. That is the first sign. And sometimes this can be a little bit complex because you could be the minority in that business. Now, that's a different situation, but it's not for today. Now, a particular group of toxic employees that lunches, grabs coffees, and organizes happy hours together, that's another sign. Projects are often offered to a particular group. Yes, I've heard of that. So I was talking to somebody and they told me how, regardless of talent or experience, certain projects only go to certain people. And they're the ones who are sort of given the acknowledgement that yes, they've done a good job. Large parts of the workday are spent whispering, chatting, or messaging on platforms. General outward disinterest from the group in anyone else unless it involves gossip or drama. Now, what is the best situation to do? And I'm hoping, and I'm saying this, I hope my listeners will think about this behavior. Gossip, for me, I think is one of the most destructive behavior in many workplaces and in life in general. Now, this podcast is about empowerment, and being empowered means realizing that your time is best spent growing and looking after yourself and investing on yourself. So engaging in behavior such as gossip is a distraction that's only leading to your downfall. This type of behavior really has no place in any workplace, and I hope in any of my listeners or the community we are forming, it has no place in our life. Now, if you recognize that cliquish behavior includes management and executive level employees, then I think you have an organizational problem, and that is going to get even more toxic. Now, the third one is, without saying much, and I've mentioned this, bad leadership. A toxic workplace will have bad leadership. Now, there's the old saying, you don't leave a job, you leave a bad boss. For a reason, bad leadership can seep into every fiber of an organization, and it often does. We are profiled, and when we profile organizations before you go into a workplace, a lot of the times you look at the mission statement, you look at the values, you look at the organizational goals, you look at the leadership. There's always a message there that's very clear. This is what we aspire to be as an organization, and that's why you're applying to that job. But when you get into that job and you see the leadership is not what has been presented on maybe the website or the external facade, that is the time to think about what is going on. Now, sometimes, and I'm going to add this, sometimes from experience, a bad boss is the product of their bad boss. So my advice is look up the organization. And this can be so on and on. So look at the top of the tree. It's this generational hierarchy of poor leadership that makes the overall workplace toxic. Now, bad bosses wear a variety of hats. It could be a micromanaging boss who constantly corrects you, undermines your decision, and ultimately disallows you from doing your job. Yes, these ones are much fun to work with, not. Or you might have the blame game boss who is quick to pass mistakes on to anyone but themselves. Or you might be lucky enough to have the no respect boss who emails you out of at all hours, forgets how to spell your name. Yes, that one somebody wrote to me, and likely doesn't even know what you do. Now, bad leadership is a sign of a toxic workplace if you have no recourse. Leadership conduct is extremely important. It sets the tone for how others behave at work. If there's an HR department, or if your bad boss has a pretty decent boss, you can try communicating these issues. But from experience, sometimes this bad leadership ensures there's no effective HR. So which means you are unable to even communicate these issues appropriately. Now, the next sign, a toxic work environment likely has unmotivated co-workers. Now, I'm not saying that you should judge your work on the quality or lack of quality of those around you. No. Take responsibility and accountability. However, when you find yourself in a workplace full of unmotivated co-workers, it's going to take its toll on you, which means you're going to have two reactions to unmotivated co-workers. The first one, and you know where I'm going with this, you're going to shoulder a ton of work that they aren't handling and find yourself burnt out. Yes, this happens a lot. And the second one, their lack of motivation is going to burn you out, and burn you out with a type of under-challenged burnout. Now, just like your colleagues can motivate you to work harder, be better, and incubate new ideas, they can wear you down. And motivated employees are usually a result of a much larger organizational problem. This is the Truth Speaking podcast. So look around you. Perhaps it's that bad communication from the top, or it might just be disorganization, disenfranchisement with leadership, or general distrust. Whatever it is, if everyone around you is unmotivated, you're in a toxic workplace. Unfortunately, unless you're in a leadership position, this problem is indicative of a much larger problems, and it's unlikely that you're going to learn or grow in this environment. Now, the next sign, a toxic workplace may and will have stifled growth. Now, speaking of growth, if you're not experiencing it in your workplace, it might be toxic, or even if it's just personally toxic for you. If your workplace doesn't seem to offer any mobility, learning opportunities, or advancing your skills or career or mentorship, they are likely not invested in the growth of their employees. Now, once you've recognized that you have nowhere to grow, it might be time to change the soil. And I'll add, your job itself isn't always responsible for inspiring and motivating you. However, if you feel completely stuck with nowhere to go, it might be time for you to move on. Now, the sixth one, a toxic workplace likely has rapid employee turnover. Rapid employee turnover is a sure sign that the workplace is toxic. Leaving a job is a tough decision to make. You don't just make that easily. Now, when you notice that several people are making that decision, then something is really, really rotten. Now, if employees are constantly being laid off or fired as well, this could be a sign of a few other toxic elements. And I have been in companies like this. And at first I thought maybe it's just a restructure. But further down the line, this was exactly what it was. It was a toxic workplace. It doesn't matter how much they try to paint it over or polish it over. Now, a high turnover rate means usually there's disorganization, lack of direction, bad leadership, or little opportunity. Now, pay attention to the turnover rate in that company. And this does not mean sometimes it could be a financial issue. But, however, if you have good leadership, you will find that this is communicated in a way to all employees, and all employees are supported so that they can find the best next opportunity for them. Rapid turnover is a big sign that things are bad or about to get worse. Now, if you can try speaking with some of those employees who are ever left, were fired, or were laid off, that would be a good place to start. Now, the next sign, a toxic workplace often has no work-life balance. You deserve to have a full life outside of work. You should be able to take some time out, and you should be able to leave an email unread after a dinner on Tuesday, as an example. Or you should be able to make your dentist appointment without feeling guilty. I've come across many people who've been made to feel guilty because they have a dentist appointment or the child is not well. Now, you should take that vacation days that you've earned. Work-life balance is essential to survival. No human being should be expected to be on the clock at all times. I mean, for the believers, even on the seventh day, God rested. Come on, our Creator is resting. So you need your vacation. Now, if your job requires that you be on call at all times, it's toxic. If your boss requires you to answer your emails on Saturday or Sunday and you don't work, your job is toxic. And this, I've talked about it in a previous episode. I've talked about, and this could come in if you go back to my episode where I talked about people pleasing. This could be part of it. If you're one of those people who feels you have to answer your emails on Saturday or Sunday and you don't work on this, you're not contracted to work on those days, then you have an issue. Yes, at times things come up at inopportune hours. However, if you're working under the expectation that you're always to be available for work or your job, in my humble opinion, that's toxic garbage. Now, a good way to avoid these types of toxic workplaces like this one, is setting healthy boundaries, which we're going to cover in our next episode. If your boundaries can't be met or at least compromised, it's probably not for you. It's not the workplace for you. Now, my number 8, a toxic workplace leaves you battling burnout. And this is becoming a significant issue. Now, we've touched upon burnout a little bit in a previous episode, but workplace burnout has now been recognized by the World Health Organization as a legitimate medical diagnosis. Just think about that. Burnout can be a sure sign of a toxic work environment, or at least a work environment that doesn't work for you. Now, there are 3 types of burnout that I've come across, and if any of this sounds familiar to you, then you know there's some changes you need to make. Now, the first burnout, known as frenetic burnout, I will attach an article down here as part of the resources I'm using so you can understand a little bit more, because this could be you. Now, remember, this has been diagnosed by the World Health Organization as a medical diagnosis. So which means this is attached to your health. And if this is you, you need to put in some health measures immediately. Now, frenetic burnout is experienced by employees who put a ton of energy into their work in the hopes that the output will be rewarding. After a sustained period of dedicated work, the frenetic worker does not find positive outcomes. Is this you? The second one, under-challenged burnout. This type of burnout occurs when an employee feels under-challenged and bored at work. Being unable to find any satisfaction in a job, the under-challenged employee finds themselves in a lowered mood. And I mean, I'm not a psychologist and I'm not coming from a medical background experience, but there's a link here. And as I say, if the World Health Organization is taking this very seriously, then you should be revisiting and reviewing what you need to put in place. And the last one is worn out burnout. The worn out employee is someone who's resigned about their work after experiencing consistent work stress over a long period of time. Having experienced negligible rewards, the worn out employee feels disillusioned and uninspired by the job at hand. I've had this one quite a lot, where you hear the word, you might have had a buzzword called quiet quitting. And I think this is what is happening with a lot of employees. So remember, this is now a health issue. Now, if you're suffering from any of these types of burnout or workplace burnout, seriously consider, number one, your health. And the second one, leaving that toxic workplace, which means you need to work on an exit strategy. I have been there. And these things can be very costly to your health, your livelihood, the people you love back at home. So please make sure that your health is a priority. If these signs and characteristics are describing you. Now the last two, and the last but not least, a toxic workplace has little or no forward movement. By that, I just mean it's a culture that's grown from sort of seedling. Whether the seed is a bad manager, a damaging fiscal year, or a damaging financial year, or an organizational failure to uphold the company's mission, this is where things start to go south. Yes. How do you know a company is not upholding its mission? Read the mission statement, read the values, and then sit back and observe. Quickly, you'll be able to decipher very quickly, and you'll be able to know what's going on. And sometimes you perhaps are in denial, or you really want that job, you want to stay there but there's nothing more important than your health. Now, if you find that you once described your job as so great and that now you can't master a good word, you're probably experiencing a brand new toxicity, one where you will no longer move forward. And that is a hard truth to swallow. Now, if your movement stalls or halts to a complete stop, it's usually the symptom of a much larger problem. Personally, I think if there's no forward movement in your career, especially in one where you previously experienced growth, it's a sign that things are toxifying. It might be time to consider moving on. And the last one, but not least, a toxic workplace triggers a gut feeling. What do I mean by gut feeling? I've already spoken about discernment. This is where, if you're a believer, discernment comes from the Holy Spirit. I did record an episode about discernment. And I think this is key in many organizations. When your gut feeling is telling you, walking, come Monday, you've got, I'll just go back a little bit. When it gets to Monday or when it gets to Sunday, and you feel your stomach, the butterflies in your stomach, and your heart's beating very fast, you can't sleep on a Sunday night because you've got work on Monday. Yes. Just like when you eat spoiled food or too much candy, your gut is the best warning sign. If your intuition is telling you that your workplace is bad, it's probably bad. If your anxiety is through the roof, if you suspect you're experiencing discrimination, and as I said, this is another thing altogether. Discrimination is it can happen in subtle ways and subtle manners. I've been in a company like that, and I was a senior leader. And discrimination, it takes your energy, and it can affect your physical and mental health. Now, if your physical health is suffering and all of this is happening on a regular basis, then there's a big problem here. And the first thing is not to be in denial. Trust your gut. If you need to get a second opinion from a friend or a loved one, do so, but your gut is a pro. Listen to it. Now, if all of the above seem reflective of your workplace might be worse than toxic. So those are the major 10 signs, but if they are exactly what we're talking about, it might be worse. You might be in a hostile work environment, and I've been in those types of environment. Hostile work environments are even worse, and it's likely that a lot of the inter-office behavior is actually illegal. The only thing is finding the energy and the time to sit there and prove to either HR or to your legal advisor that yes, this is happening at work. So it's finding that balance to think, do I want to pursue this? Because it could take the rest of your life trying to go down a line of and put in your energy to try and prove that this has happened to you at work, or you could just move on and rebuild your life somewhere else. Now, some of the characteristics of an absolute hostile environment include sexual harassment, lack of inclusion, comments about sexual orientation, race, creed, or disability. In fact, I was with a boss one time who felt the need to describe an experience and use the N-word. But that was this boss was a bully. She was a bully, she was a narcissist. And that's how this type of behavior, it's illegal. It's just, you don't want to spend the time and the effort chasing these types of people, because from experience, I do know that those types of people eventually, and even if you're a believer particularly, the Bible is very, very clear. Evil people don't stop. Those are people that you've just got to leave. Eventually, they are like a rotten apple tree. They'll just fall down by themselves. So you've just got to leave them to it. Now, no human resource in a company could be a sign that you're in a hostile environment. As I say, I was in that type of environment where there was no appropriate HR. And that is a problem. And as I say, this is sometimes because of a bad boss who's got a bad boss. Bullying, groups of people at odds with each other. These are signs of a hostile environment. And sometimes this toxicity can come or can move to online, because a lot of people are now working from home. I've had many people. I've spoken to many people, and they've told me of their experiences of working from home, where sometimes the gossip has moved to the online platforms or digital meetings where employees are overlooked, or they're not able to speak in these meetings. And this is quite critical, because this is a way of bullying, and it might look subtle, but if it makes you feel a certain way, if your gut is telling you that this is what's happening, then listen to your gut. So, with that said, in this episode, I want to thank you for tuning in as a start, and I really want to encourage you, because I know this can be very difficult to hear, particularly if you're enjoying the job or you love the job, but you're surrounded with this type of behaviors, or there's a culture there that doesn't include you, or you feel excluded. It can be a very difficult pill to swallow. But there is strategies and actions and principles that you can apply. Now, in this episode, we've covered most of the common signs of toxic workplace, from poor communication to bad leadership, cliques, and stifled growth. These are some of the red flags that signal a toxic workplace culture. If you recognize these signs, then this is the first step towards creating a healthier and more positive environment. But this journey, I want to encourage you, doesn't just stop here. I want to encourage you to join us in our next episode, because we will be diving deeper into actionable strategies and principles for dealing with toxic workplaces. You will be able to understand how to navigate challenging dynamics, protect your well-being, which is a priority and a key, and foster positive change in your professional life. Don't miss out. Tune in into our next episode for invaluable insights and empowering guidance. And lastly, thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. I know it hasn't been easy, but if you haven't already, please subscribe, stay updated, and empower yourself with the tools you need to thrive in any work environment. And lastly, please make sure you're looking after yourself.